Graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, and a technology professional based in Silicon Valley. He fell in love with hockey at age 6 when the moment he witnessed his hometown San Jose Sharks enter the ice through a giant shark head while Metallica blared in the background. He's excited to combine his degree in economics with his experience in technology to build tools to augment the quality of public data analysis. So welcome, Rushil.
Hey everyone, my name is Rushil, and I'm excited to share a piece of software I built with you guys called the Tape-to-Tape Tracker. Before I get into the presentation, just wanted to take a quick moment to thank the folks with the Vancouver Canucks, Hockey Graphs, Simon Fraser University, and last but not least, the meme god himself, Josh Weisbach, for putting on this great event. Quick overview, I'm going to talk about the shortcomings of currently available hockey data. We'll talk about a quick demo on the platform as to how we're going to collect some more insightful data. We'll go over some use cases of this data, and finally, we'll talk about how we're going to go about collecting this data via crowdsourcing. So like I suspect, a lot of you as well, was always a very visual learner growing up. It was always, pictures more so than numbers or words that really made the most sense to me, that really resonated with me the best. So back in the day when I #played the game, one of the parts about hockey practice that I really liked was when the coach would kind of gather everybody around, and they have a whiteboard, and they basically draw or diagram out some plays or drills. And so as a visual learner, this is what made the most sense to me, right? This is how I found the most effective way for me to internalize and understand my roles and responsibilities on the ice as a player. So with that sort of visual perspective in mind, the question I want to pose to you guys is, do publicly available stats paint a complete picture of the game? And so, I posed this question, I use the phrase paint a picture, metaphorically. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was actually kind of posing this question somewhat literally as well. And so an anecdote I wanted to share with you guys is a story about Wayne Gretzky. You guys may have heard this before, but the story goes is, when Wayne was a child, maybe 3 or 4 years old, he would be watching hockey games on TV. And he'd be sitting right up by the television with a notepad and a pen, and he'd be watching the game. And he wouldn't be looking at his notepad, but as he was watching the game, he would be drawing where the puck was going on the ice. So this is the kind of visual perspective that was really kind of inspirational to me in terms of understanding the game. So the way I'm going to answer this question is by showing you guys a couple film clips real quick of a couple different goals. Now, as I show you these two clips, the things I want you to think about are how the play develops up the ice, right? Where is the puck going in terms of creating the scoring opportunity? So the first example, this is from a Devils and Coyotes game on December 2nd, and I'm going to go ahead and run this. Cool, and everybody's happy. Now, in case you were caught napping, like the Devils were on that play, I'm going to run that one more time. So, defenseman picks up on the puck in his own zone. He hits the first forward, second forward, picks up speed, drops it back, clean look, buries it. Now, the second example, this is from a Senators and Jets game on December 3rd. So a little bit different, right? And now, so the question I want to ask you guys is, are these two goals the same? Now, you guys are a pretty hockey savvy audience. The answer, should hopefully be obviously not. The first example, this was a play in which the Coyotes were able to pick up the puck, generate a ton of speed, going up the ice, coming up the right wing side, a ton of speed, backed off the defenseman, use that to create space, cut to the middle, and drop it back and create a clean look. Whereas in the second example, we saw that the Jets already had puck possession in the offensive zone, and this was a great example of puck recovery. So there was a broken play, the puck kind of scored into the corner. They had a pass behind the net, and then ultimately some great vision from Scheifele to find Wheeler in front of the net. Now, the problem is well, obviously we see that very different things are happening in the build-up to these particular goals. But according to the NHL's official stats, these two goals are the exact same, right? And I'd like to call your attention to the right-hand part of the slide, where if we look at the location diagram of the rink, we see the only sort of visual information captured about this goal was where the player was when he shot the puck into the net. And we see in both cases it was sort of in that mid to high slot area. So obviously there was a reason I picked these two clips, right? We see that there's one similarity in terms of the location, but there's a huge amount of difference in terms of the build up to that particular goal. So what's missing is context. We have the what, the player scored a goal. We have the where was that player when they shot the puck into the net. What we're missing is the how, right? How did that puck get to the position in which the players are able to score a goal? So what would a solution look like? Well, a solution might look like a system for tracking, and tracking broadly two things, right? One thing we could do is annotate the official NHL data. So we can take that, the data that, notwithstanding some of the complaints from yesterday, for the most part is pretty accurate with regards to where shots and goals are occurring from. And we can annotate that data with things like passing information as to how the puck got there. The second thing we can do is supplement that official NHL data with things like zone entries and zone exits, and really put those two data sources together to create a more complete picture. So with that in mind, I'm going to run you guys through a quick demo of the app. Cool, so I'm logged into my account here. You guys can create an account and log in. It's totally free. And so I'm going to find that game in question for that first goal. So that was December 2nd, and that was the Arizona Coyotes and New Jersey Devils game. And so when I click on the game, I'm brought to this game dashboard, and I'll just quickly walk you guys through a couple things. So if you go to the right side, you can see all the shot events and the locations. This is all stuff that was just scraped in from the NHL website. The other thing you can see is we have the on-ice information right down here. So let's go find the goal in question. So this was that goal in third period where Dylan Strome shot it in from right there in the slot. So again, if we think back to that clip, what happened in the lead up to the goal? Well, the first thing we saw was that the Arizona had the puck in their own zone, and so they were able to exit the zone. So what I'll do is I'm going to create a new zone exit, and we'll say this was in the third period with about 6 minutes and 30 seconds left. The first thing you'll notice is that the on-ice information auto-populates, so we were able to scrape in the shift charts, and so for any given point in time during the game, you can very easily compute who is on ice. And so this was a controlled exit, and it was by number 9, Clayton Keller, and he exited the zone kind of on the right wing side. And if you remember, what happened right before that was the defenseman kind of fed him the puck from here to here, and that was number 39, Hanley, to number 9, Clayton Keller. And then we can go ahead and save that play. Now the next thing that happened was Keller had the puck kind of on the right wing side, and then he was able to hit the forward kind of streaking across the middle, who then entered the zone on the right wing side as well. So we'll create a new zone entry. Once again, we'll pop in the time right here. And that was a controlled entry by number 36, Christian Fisher, again kind of on the right wing side. And then we can add another pass from Keller over to Fisher right there. We can go ahead and save that. Then the last thing that happened was the goal, right? We saw Dylan Strome shot it in from the slot. Right before that, there was a setup pass coming from once again Fisher over to Strome. So now we have some information about the passes that led up to a particular goal. But the real power is being able to understand and visualize how all of these events kind of went together. So what I can do is I can link the events all together. So I hit this button, linked events down here, and I can link the zone exit with the zone entry. And go ahead and save that. So now you see we've got a much more visually complete picture of how that play kind of developed up the ice, right? They came up the right-hand side, and then they were able to cut to the middle and then drop it back. And so the last thing I'll just quickly point out is there's an option to export the plays. So what I did was I went through and I tracked a bunch of information, a bunch of plays for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And so I'd love to share some of that stuff with you guys. So I exported all the information, and I got something that looked like that. This looks less like something that helps me understand a game and more looks like something that belongs in the Museum of Modern Art. So, to follow up on Ashley's presentation yesterday, we'd like to kind of hopefully visualize something a little bit more insightful. So what I was able to do was I was able to take a lot of this passing information and use a machine learning algorithm called k-means. And in a nutshell, what k-means does is it takes a bunch of data points and it tries to kind of cluster them or organize them into buckets of like similar data points. So let's take a look at what some of these clusters of passes would look like. Okay, still a little bit chaotic, but we're getting somewhere. So if we look at cluster 1, what we see is this is the cluster of passes that all originated sort of from that left corner. And so all the black arrows are individual passes, and the red arrow is sort of the mean pass of that particular cluster. So we see a bunch of passes originating from the left-hand side. Now the second cluster are passes coming from that center field location, right? So this is usually a defenseman who has the puck kind of up top. They're not at one of the particular points, but they have the puck kind of in that center field location and they're distributing it from there. Now the third cluster, actually let me go into full screen here. The third cluster is passes going from right to left. So we see, relative again to the fourth cluster where it's passes going from left to right, we see a much higher density of passes coming from that side. And so again, this is one of the tendencies we can see is that Tampa Bay seems to really like feeding the puck from that right-hand side. And that might be because, they have a couple very skilled centermen that are, right-handers, so maybe they like passing the puck that way. So the next set of data I also took a look at that I'd like to kind of do some comparing and contrasting with was from the Detroit Red Wings. So this was a passing sample, data collected by Prashant Iyer, so all the credit goes to him for that. But we can already see some interesting differences with regards to between the Red Wings and the Lightning. So if you look at this first cluster up here, we see a lot of low to high passes that were able to create shots. So if you look at the red arrow, the mean of that cluster is coming from behind the net. And that was not a cluster that we saw from the Lightning. So, relative to the Lightning, Detroit seems to be generating a lot more of its offense, from behind the net. And this is one of the ways we can visualize that. So clusters, the second two clusters on the bottom, again, are passes kind of going from left to right and right to left. And again, one of the ways we can contrast the Red Wings with the Lightning is we see a much higher density of passes that are going back up to the points, right? So kind of highlighted in green over there. And again, if we go back to the Lightning, we didn't see that many passes going back that way. And the other thing to look at is if we look at the red arrows, the position of the red arrows over here, like the mean of that cluster, we see that they're kind of right above the face-off circles. Right? But whereas with the Lightning, we see that these red arrows are going right through the slot, right through that Royal Road area. Now the reason that's important is because you guys may be familiar with some of the research around the Royal Road, and what that research basically showed us is that passes going through that middle of the ice, like going right through the slot area, actually have a much higher shooting percentage than other shots. So I think from this sample, we saw that the shooting percentage on passes through the Royal Road was something like 13 or 14%, whereas it was like 6 or 7% for other passes. So just an interesting way to kind of compare and contrast some of the different passing strategies.
Does it matter that one was a 100 pass sample and this is a 200 pass sample?
Yeah, obviously there's like a little bit of difference in sample size, and I'll get to that in just a moment. And so once we have this passing data, one of the things we can do is actually look at, chaining these clusters of passes together, right? So if we know, we can bucket all the passes into clusters, we can start looking at tendencies on what passes tend to follow other groups of passes. So this is from Tampa Bay, and this is one of their common sequences on their scoring plays. So we see, like I was talking about, that center field pass coming from the middle of the ice, kind of up top with the defenseman. And what we saw fairly often was that the defenseman was feeding the puck to one of the forwards along that sort of the right-hand side area on the right face-off dot, and that forward was immediately sending a pass right through that Royal Road area to a forward in the left face-off circle who was oftentimes kind of setting up for a one-timer. Just to kind of clarify what's happening in this diagram, I was talking about that center field pass cluster what we saw a lot was the defenseman either distributing it to the left side or the right side. And so what ended up happening was the mean of that cluster kind of looked like it was going straight, whereas that cluster actually captures passes that are going from center field to the right side as well as to the left side. So what you see is that the dotted arrow over here represents, you know, one of the actual common passes. So from the from the middle over to the right side and then over to the left side. So now that we have, you know, this platform, we have some interesting things we can do with this data. The way we're going to go about collecting this data is actually through crowdsourcing. So we kind of announced we kind of did a soft launch on the platform a couple months ago, and we're super excited to announce that we have trackers signed up for all 31 teams. We've still been kind of sorting out, you know, just tweaking the platform, making sure it's ready for everybody to start tracking on it. But the official tracking project is going to begin very soon. We're hoping in the next couple weeks. And we're going to make this data available all for free. You know, obviously we wouldn't try to profit off of people who are volunteer tracking. We'll have a Patreon for people to just kind of donate if they you know, find the data helpful, just to help keep the lights on. And this is always a work in progress. So if there's things about the platform, things about the data you like and you want to see more of, we're always happy to take that into consideration. And then just actually one more thing to kind of follow up on Garrett's presentation. So obviously, right, you know, this is one of the usual caveats of tracking that I should specify is obviously there's you know, it's subject to human bias, human error, and things like that. And ultimately, you know, to the extent until, you know, actual computer vision-based tracking technology and data becomes public, you know, we feel like this is a really interesting data source that could be made available for people to, you know, help augment their expected goals models and things like that. To the extent that tracking data ultimately becomes public, I will go back to being outdated and irrelevant. Or in other words, I'll be a perfect match for a front office job at the... I'm not going to finish that joke, but feel free to, you know, fill in the blanks there. I'd be remiss not to make a couple shout outs. Prashant Iyer and Mike Almore for the hype and, you know, the design input and, you know, organizing all the trackers. Chris Neist for helping me scrape some of the data. And Devin Pluler for the pass clustering and chaining concept. So that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed it and happy to take any questions.
Same thing, if you have questions, raise your hand or wait, Mike.
Yeah. Do you take into account that some passes are actually not passes, they're shots being deflected?
That's a great question, and that's actually that's one of the features I'm actually working on right now, because obviously that's, you know, a very common thing that happens in a game. So yeah, that's definitely going to be a part of the platform. We're still trying to figure out what the best way to represent that is, but yeah, great point.
And the second one is also, do you support board-involved play, like passes off the board, billiard style?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like, you know, when the puck gets rimmed around the corner, things like that.
Not only that,
yeah.
Zone exits through the board are extremely popular.
Right.
Some at least the Sharks used to have it as their main way of the zone exit.
Yeah, again, this is one of the things we're definitely aware of, and we're trying to work on the right way to visualize that and then represent that in data. So I guess, again, one of the challenges with that is, you know, if you're talking about a rim play or a play where it's banked off the wall to, you know, towards, you know, the middle of the
I mean
ice
more
somewhere.
billiard style plays.
What style?
Billiard style.
Oh, billiards. Okay. Yeah. Again, the challenge with that is, you know, finding a cohesive way to represent that in the data as well as visualize it, but definitely something in the pipeline.
Hi, I'm actually on your website right now. It looks great. One of the questions I have is I'm looking for like an API or a mass download. Do you have plans to integrate that, or am I missing it?
Yeah, so, you know, once we get the tracking project started, we're going to make all the data available, you know, publicly. You know, whether that's API, whether that's you know, Dropbox links, whether that's in, you know, being able to download it in the app itself. Again, we're still trying to figure out what the best way for that is to, what the best way to download the data is going to be. But again, like I said, we're always happy to take suggestions. If you guys feel like an API makes the most sense, we can implement that. If it's more of a, you know, in-app solution, we could do that as well.
Look at that.
Just a quick quick question. So with the k-means and with like the clustering and showing the red arrows, does the site automatically do that for you, or?
That's a good question. So right now, no. This was data that I just exported from what I tracked, and I kind of pulled it into a Python notebook and done some of that analysis and visualization myself. But having said that, yeah, it's something that we could support. It would be awesome to have that in the app as well, so that you could just kind of download that. I think the long-term vision is to have a resource similar to what Corsica is like, where you can have all this data kind of under one roof, kind of separate from the whole tracking interface, where you can have all these charts pretty much ready to go with stuff like that.
Just one last question.
If you don't mind, I'm actually a little curious behind the technology on the back end and what you've been using to build the site.
Yeah, so on the back end was actually the easiest part. So it was just simply a matter of kind of scraping in all the data from the NHL, which tons of people have done before. I have like a Node.js server on the back end, which is kind of serving all the data to the front end. If you guys are familiar with web development, it was like Angular on the front end, which I'm quickly coming to regret. Should have gone the React direction. Shit happens, but yeah, that's the stack.
Thank you very much. That was great. Really awesome app.